tried to reboot it to fix the camera and I lost my mic. But let's talk about who is sponsoring tonight's WineCast. Tonight's WineCast is brought to you by J. Hilburn Menswear. Local style advisor Therese Nelson will meet with you at your home or office to show you the complete line. From custom shirts to jeans and sweaters, and for you ladies, there are gift cards, perfect for the holidays or special occasions. For more information or to schedule an appointment with Therese, visit her at theresenelson.jhilburn.com. So hopefully you guys can hear me okay. The screen's not jumping, but now I got a different mic going right now. So let me know if there's any sound problems, you guys. I'd love to know. But here we are. We are at my wine school, where it is wine your way, and I've got Karen here with me, helping me start to bring in the new year early. And if you're new and don't know how to say hello or get a part of the conversation, we're broadcasting live from our home screen, and you can just type in anything under audience, and you can either log in or sign up. And if you choose to sign up today, then you can fill in these 5 fields, and boom, you are a part of the conversation. So here we are at WineCast number 24. This is for our wine gurus. This is for, this is like our weekly tasting group. We're going to get a little bit more technical in this WineCast. So if you kind of get a little lost, go back and check out WineCast number 22 and number 23. We really went over sparkling wine in those first 2. So today we're going to be sticking with the one that we just reviewed in WineCast number 23. We're still going to have the Taltarni Brut Taches. We're going to finally talk about what the tache means in the name of the wine. It's what we call non-vintage, meaning it doesn't come from a specific year, and it's from Australia, also Tasmania, which is just an island south of Australia. So let's see here. We are, like I said, we totally skipped over a part of the wine, which is tache. Tache means stained. And as you can see, this wine looks a little stained. It's actually a rosé wine. And I want to know, when you guys think of pink wines, you too, Karen, what do you think of? What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of a pink wine?
Bubbly love in a glass.
All right, okay. Love, yeah, it's a beautiful color. I definitely love the color. Christine or Justin is saying Tavel, so they're mentioning a certain region in the south of France, which is really well known for making rosé wines. Rosa, Rosé Regale maybe is another thing that someone is mentioning. Well, it's interesting because this is fantastic, because usually what we find, Brian saying red fruit with great acid, but usually you guys are good, okay? Usually what you find if you put this out to people is a pink wine is sweet. That is usually the feedback you get. A lot of people think that sweet wines have to be sweet, and that is not the case all the time. But there's a good reason why people think that that rosé wines are sweet. And this was actually fun. I actually got to reference my own research. In 2009, I had to write a paper on the future of rosé wines, and I had to choose 3 countries. And one of them I chose was the U.S. And so I found out a lot about the history of rosé wine consumption. And I wrote this back in 2009. And if you're interested, I'll post it on the WineCast blog number 24. So it'll be under MWS Decants. I'll post the actual article. And I did this back in 2009. So the numbers are for 2007. But in 2007, 17% of U.S. consumption was rosé. Of that 17%, that's a large percentage, by the way. Of that, though, of that 17%, of that rosé wine, almost 90% of it was white Zinfandel, was sweet. Okay? So white Zinfandel is a part of the fabric of our wine history. I mean, it is a part of where we came from. As late as 2007, the number 2 and number 4 wine sold in restaurants across the U.S. were both white Zins. That's how much white Zin is sold. So people, rightfully so, when they see pink, they think white Zin, and when you think white Zinfandel, you think sweet. That does not have to be the case. The color of the wine is completely separate from the actual sweetness levels. And French and Europeans have been making bone-dry rosés for 1,000 years, and I mean 1,000 years. In fact, down in Tavel, where Christine and Justin were mentioning, rosé wines were being produced as early as 2,000 years ago, and those wines were the wines that the nobility drank. And it was actually the red wines that were given to the poor class, or the lower class. So at one point, rosé wines, dry rosé wines, were really coveted as the best types of wines that there were. Now, it's interesting because, champagne and rosés get to this color in different ways. It's interesting because champagne and sparkling wines kind of get to do their own thing. There's rules and laws that are put into place for still wine, and champagne and sparkling wine kind of get to bend the rules a little. They get to put a lot of different vintages in, a lot of non-vintage wines. They get to blend grapes, which is fairly common, but they also get to put this color in a very different way. So what do I mean by that? Most wines are going to get their color from red grapes, first to start there, okay? Almost all red grapes are red on the outside or black on the outside, they're colored, tinted, and on the inside it's a clear or pale juice. And so the only way to get color is from the skins. So when you're making, say, a red wine, this is, a picture of Pinot Noir fermenting. It's fermenting, and if you were to press these grapes right away, you'd get a really light rosé, actually, if that, because it's white juice and it doesn't have a lot of exposure to the skins. But most red wines are going to sit on the skins for a good, say, 2 to 3 weeks, and they're going to really be able to extract a lot of color. Whereas all rosé is an abbreviated red wine production. Now, there's all different types of making rosé wine, but I'm keeping it simple here. It's abbreviated red wine production. So instead of, say, 2 to 3 weeks on the skins, a rosé will spend 2 to 3 hours, or 2 to 3 days, or sometimes it's just pressed immediately. In fact, if you talk about white Zinfandel, Zinfandel was very popular in the U.S. and in the 1970s, Sutter Home said, "Okay, we've got tons of Zinfandel. We want to make our Zinfandel even more concentrated. So we're going to take some of that pale juice off so that we increase the amount of skins to juice ratio, and then we're going to get an even darker, deeper red Zinfandel." But that juice that was immediately pressed off had a little color because Zinfandel has thick skins. And so even if you press it immediately, you're going to get a pink color. Well, that white Zinfandel was taken aside and it was called white Zinfandel, right? It was the juice from the red Zinfandel grape. Now, the way that white Zinfandel got sweet was actually a complete mistake. It was off in a fermentation tank and the fermentation got stuck. Now, when we talk about fermentation, you start with lots of sugars and no alcohol. As the yeast eat the sugar goes down and the alcohol goes up. Now, in most cases, you have that happening fairly fluidly. There's problems, and the problems are resolved usually by using what we call commercial yeast that yield predictable results. But what happened with this white Zin, this one tank of white Zin, was that the fermentation started to happen, but then it got stuck. It was called a stuck fermentation. And as a result, you had lower alcohol but higher sugars. And they thought it was a complete mistake. But then a couple weeks later, they tried it and they're like, hey, this is kind of good. They released it and it was a huge success. So white Zinfandel wasn't intentional. It was a complete mistake. And it's important to know that the color is very separate from the sweetness levels. The color came from the skins. The sweetness levels come from the fermentation process. And after that mistake was found out to be a very profitable mistake, they decided, okay, now when we make our white Zin, we're going to stop it. We're going to kill off all the yeast so that the white Zin cannot ferment all the way, and we're going to keep it sweet. So when you have a sweet wine, it's usually a very deliberate decision of the winemaker. So that's a lot of information. Let's get on to wine IQ number 1. This is our wine interactive questions meant to really get you guys involved. And I want to know, what grapes are typically used in champagne? Now, we went over this in the last WineCast, so if you were listening on that one, this will be an easy one, but it's either A, Pinot Grigio, Pinot Blanc, Pinot Noir, B, Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay, C, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier and Chardonnay, or D, Pinot Noir, Riesling and Merlot. So now, if all the color has to come from red grapes, then we obviously have some red grapes going on in this wine here, right? Because we've got color. Now, but where does that wine come from? Or where does that color come from? Now, I mentioned the color that comes into your sparkling wine comes in a different way than our still wines. I mentioned in our still wines, you just have an abbreviated red wine production. How do we get the color in here? We add a little bit of red wine to the white wine. Now that's like sounds so scandalous in the wine world. I know it's like, well, who cares? But by law, you can't do that in still wine. You cannot add red and white wine to make pink wine. You cannot do that. So champagne and sparkling wine kind of get to do their own thing here and say, okay, we're just going to add a little red wine, and in this case, at the end of the production. So what are people saying on this one, Karen? Are they chiming in with the right answer?
Everyone's coming in at C.
Good. So C. So Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and Chardonnay are the grapes that are typically used in Champagne. Now, that said, as we mentioned in the previous WineCAST, this Taltarni is made to replicate or to imitate the style of Champagne. And as such, it uses the same grapes. It uses the Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and Chardonnay grapes. Now, Chardonnay is a white grape, whereas Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier are the red grapes. So we might infer that we were getting some of our color from the Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. But actually, it's interesting because Taltarni actually adds a little Cabernet Sauvignon. You know, leave it to the new world to really say, okay, we're just going to do it our own way. In Champagne, it would come from the Pinot Noir, and it would usually be added just before the secondary fermentation, which we talked about in the last WineCAST. But in this case, at the very, very end, they add about, I think it's 15 milliliters of Cabernet Sauvignon, which is interesting. It's very different. This is where they take liberty in designing their own wine and deviate from the style of Champagne. So let's see here. Let's actually, one other thing I want to talk about with the grapes, going back to the grapes in Champagne, is that C was the right answer. We had Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and Chardonnay. Now, we saw in the earlier WineCAST that our label had Blanc de Blanc. That's in the script there under Francois Montan. And I'll put it up for you so you can see what it looks like. Blanc de Blanc means white wine from white grapes. So that wine came from white grapes. In Champagne, that would have to mean, a Blanc de Blanc would have to mean white wine from Chardonnay. Now, on the other hand, you have something called Blanc de Noir. So this would be a white wine coming from red grapes. And so our red grapes in Champagne are Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. So when you see that, you know that the grapes, if it's from Champagne, would be Pinot Noir and or Pinot Meunier. So let's take a look at this this wine. You know, I keep showing it. It's so pretty. It's that just slight amount of color is coming from that slight addition of Cabernet Sauvignon. And what's interesting is that sparkling rosés are on the rise. They are hot right now. And in Champagne, the region of Champagne, there is a shortage of sparkling rosés. Not only is there a shortage, but there's increased demand. So you can guess what's happening to the prices on sparkling champagnes. They're expensive. Rosé champagnes, they're all sparkling in Champagne. Sparkling rosé champagnes are very expensive. And as a result, this is why I like this wine even more, is that I get my sparkling rosé at a third of the price. This comes in right around $20. Now, what's interesting about this, though, is that in Champagne, a sparkling rosé on the nose doesn't really smell all that different, I think, from just white sparkling wines. I really think it's the color that everyone's in love with, which I get it. I am too sometimes. But what I love about this wine too is I think you can actually smell a little bit of that red wine on the sparkling wine, which gives it some more character. So go ahead and smell this. We smelled it before and people got apple. I want to see if you get red fruit on this. Go ahead and smell the wine and see if you get red fruit. And what's interesting is that when you have a Blanc de Noir, so it doesn't even have to have this rosé color, or you have a rosé, you can often get red fruit flavors in Champagne or outside of Champagne. And that's because they're coming from red grapes, from Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. So let me know what you guys think. Do you guys get any red fruit on here? A little like green strawberries. It's, you know, it's not a really ripe ripe red fruit, but you get a little bit of red fruit, and I really like that, because then you're getting what a rosé sparkling should be. It's still not bone dry. It's still dry, but you're getting a little bit of that red fruit on it. So again, another reason why I like this wine. It shows its colors. It takes the champagne model and then says, you know what? I'm gonna make it my own, and that's what I find really cool about this wine. So you guys tell me now what you guys think about this wine, and I want to hear what you would pair with this wine, because this is one thing I love about sparkling rosés is they've got a little bit more, well, they're pretty, but then they've got some of this red fruit, but then also they're fantastic for food pairings. So Cindy and Brian were mentioning they got a little bit of raspberries, and Brian said cassis. Yeah, definitely, I see that. And some people are coming in already with their thoughts on the wine. Christine or Justin are saying stock it. They're serving at their holiday open house. This is a great wine to serve. I often it's a go-to wine for me too. It's a little bit more expensive, but I think the quality that it delivers is really nice. Karen, what would you serve with this wine?
Well, I think this would go great with anything real kind of salty and fatty. So maybe some duck fat fries, French fries, or a pate, or.
So Karen's saying, I don't know if you can hear it because we got a new mic. The duck fat fries. Heck yeah! I hope you're making that for New Year's Eve. Okay, you bring the duck fat fries. I'm bringing the Taltarni. Yeah, this. You know what's great about a rosé in general is that you get the acid and the kind of lightness of a white wine, but with the body of a red wine too. I mean, you really get the best of both worlds, which makes it fantastic for food and wine pairing. So Brian is also saying buy and stock it, and Cindy definitely buy and stock. Yeah, I would definitely buy this one again. I think it's, like I said, it's a fun wine. It's from Tasmania. What wines are from Tasmania, you know? So I think that's where we're gonna sign off for today. I wanna wish you guys a happy new year. I also want to remind you though, next week there is no WineCast on January 4th. We're gonna take a break. We're gonna regroup. And we're going to come back on January 11th, and we're going to be going down to 1 to 2 WineCasts a night. I am busting these out as much as I can, but it's a lot of work, and I really need to get more viewers. So you guys, I'm asking you guys to tell your friends about this. We're going to be amping up the marketing as well. We really took the first part of 2011 to just figure this out, figure out this model, see if it works, see if people like it, and from the feedback we get from you guys, it seems like you like it. So it's a new concept, so we've really got to like tell people what it is, and like inform of what it is, but then also convince them to try it once. I think most of you were pretty skeptical about the idea, but now I see a lot of you guys every week, and I think once you try it, it's just like, what, this is free, I'm learning, I'm drinking. It's like a book club, no books, no homework, but lots of wine, right? I mean, it doesn't get better than that. So, and it's Wednesday night. It's perfect to get over the hump day. But we'll see you back on January 11th. We'll be back in full force, maybe a couple changes here and there, but we'll still be drinking and having lots of fun. So from Karen and I, we say Happy New Year to everyone. Have a good one, have a safe one, and we'll see you in the new year. I'm Jessica Bell from My Wine School, where is wine your